Happy Read Across Jamaica Day, boys and girls. My name is Auntie Mandy, and in recognition of this very special day, I would like to share with you a story that I wrote. I wrote this story especially for little children like you. Yes, like you. Before I start to read, I would like you to put your thinking caps on. Yes, put on those thinking caps. Close your mouths. Open your ears. Because it is story time. Are you ready? Let us begin. Hardairs Jr. learns a lesson. A read aloud Jamaican tale for children. Junior was 10 years old, and he was an adventurous boy. But he was also quite wayward. He never listened to his mommy or any other grown-up who scolded him when he got into mischief. Junior loved to climb. He loved to go up onto his roof and hop around from one neighbor's roof to the next. Junior also loved to climb fruit trees. He loved to pick ota-iti apples, stringy mangoes, and tamarind, and no other boy in his neighborhood could climb faster or higher than he could. But Junior was afraid of lizards, and whenever he climbed a tree, he was always very careful. He made sure to keep an eye out for the small reptiles as he scampered from limb to limb. His mother was very protective of Junior, and she often tried to discourage him from this risky habit. Junior, stop going up into those trees and stop running around on the housetop, she warned. Boy, you're going to hurt yourself one of these days. Who can't hear will what? Feel. But as soon as Mommy went off to work, Junior would set off on another lofty adventure. Junior's next door neighbor, Mr. Roy, had an ota-iti apple tree in his yard, and the fruit was beginning to bear. Junior and his friends, Andre and Romario, had been eyeing this tree for weeks. Now that they were home from school on Easter holidays and the apples were starting to ripen, they believed it was time to reap the crop. The three boys went up onto Junior's roof and leapt across to Mr. Roy's roof. Then they lay down on the concrete slab on their tummies and peered down into the yard to make sure that Mr. Roy was not at home. Mr. Roy's front door was closed, so, certain that he was gone, the boys jumped down onto the top of the wall and slid down to the ground, landing in Mr. Roy's yard and under the apple tree. They agreed that Junior would do the climbing while Andre and Romario acted as lookouts. So, Junior swung his body up into the tree and was in the top, perched on his slender limb, when he glanced down and saw his two friends dashing towards Mr. Roy's gate. Hey, Junior! It was Mr. Roy. He flew out of his house like a stampeding bull. What are you doing in the tree, little boy? He stopped underneath the apple tree and looked up at Junior. What are you doing in my tree, eh? He shook his head and blew out a burst of air. He had been caught red-handed. It's a apple me didn't want pick, Mr. Roy, he shouted down. Apple? Mr. Roy bellowed. Which apple? You don't see that the apple them not ready yet, eh? But, Mr. Roy, them red. That means that them can eat, Junior argued. Red which part, eh? Them just start catch little color. Junior looked down at Mr. Roy's angry face. His arms were flying all over the place, and as he flashed his head, his long black dreadlocks tossed about. But Junior was used to Mr. Roy cursing all the time. He was not the least bit intimidated. He wanted some apples, and he wanted them today. Why couldn't Mr. Roy just be cool and let him pick some? He continued to plead his case. But, Mr. Roy, some of them red. Me can't pick one. Please. Mr. Roy shook his head and stomped his foot. Little boy, stop arguing with big man and come down. Come down now. Junior climbed down slowly, mumbling under his breath. Mr. Roy, it's just one apple me want. One dege apple. Why you so mean? Mean? Who mean? Little boy, don't make her get mad out here today. Mr. Roy reached up and took hold of Junior's shirt collar and pulled him down to the ground. Listen to me. Don't make me have to tell your mother about this when she come home. Spit flew out of his mouth as he pointed one finger against Junior's chest. The apple them just turning pink. Them can't eat yet. Them will sick you. And them don't even have any taste yet. Them need more time to ripe properly. What's wrong with you, youth? Junior folded his arms and pushed out his bottom lip. Mr. Roy reminded him of a big scary lion he had seen on National Geographic. He even sounded like he was roaring too. Why your ears so hard, little boy? How much time you hear your mother warning you? Who can't hear will feel. You ever hear that yet? Junior kicked one young apple that was lying on the dirt ground and nodded his head. Mummy always tell me. And you know why she always telling you that? Mr. Roy asked in a softer voice. Junior shook his head stubbornly. He shoved his hands into his pockets and shrugged his shoulders. Consequences! Consequences! That is what it means. If you climb the tree when big people tell you not to climb the tree and drop out, that is what it means. Trouble that! You think your mother have money to pay a hospital bill? Mr. Roy said as he pushed Junior gently towards the gate. The apple them should ripe in about 2 more weeks. Then I will pick some for you, Andre and Romario. Them think me never see them around. Suddenly Junior heard laughter in the lane outside Mr. Roy's yard and realized that Andre and Romario had been hiding out there. He imagined his 2 friends peeping through the holes in the zinc fence, watching as Mr. Roy scolded him. They had a habit of getting him into trouble and abandoning him when the going got too tough. Andre and Romario were 2 big chickens, Junior thought. He was going to have lots of fun teasing them later. He shook his head and tried to understand what Mr. Roy meant by consequences. "You don't come back over here. You hear me, Junior?" Junior hung his head as if he was ashamed. "Sorry, Mr. Roy," he mumbled. "Go home, man," Mr. Roy commanded. "Go take your book and watch TV." The very next day was a Saturday, and Junior's mommy had to go downtown to the Coronation Market to buy provisions for the house. She called her son and spoke to him sternly. "Junior, I want you to stay in the yard until I come back from town," she said as she wagged a finger at him. "Don't go on the house top and don't leave the yard. I don't want to get anybody report from anybody when I come home." "Okay, Mummy," Junior answered. "And I don't want Andre and Romario over here either," his mother added. "I'll soon come back." She gave him a little kiss on the cheek and patted him on the head before slipping on her shoes and taking up her market bag. "I will buy some stringy mango and you can have some, but only if you don't get into any trouble." Junior walked with Mommy to their zinc gate and fastened the bolt when she went through. He made up his mind to try really hard to be a good boy. He knew that if he left the yard or went up onto the roof, then Mr. Roy or Miss Tiny or Marlou might see him, and they would be sure to tell on him, and then He would never get to taste the sweet, stringy mangoes his mother had promised to bring home. He decided to watch cartoons, but none of his favorites were on. Rugrats and Dora the Explorer and Little Bill were for babies. He sat down to read his school book, but after reading about the narrow escape of several different characters for about a half an hour, he started to feel bored. He took his marbles outside, but he realized after a short time that playing by himself was no fun at all. Junior sat fiddling with a stick, making circles in the dirt. He sighed and glanced up at the sky. That was when he saw the laden branches of Mr. Roy's apple tree swaying gently in the April breeze. They were beckoning to him, and after a while he thought he could hear little voices floating all around him. "Come pick me! No, don't pick him! Pick me!" He gazed at the apples for a few minutes as he tried hard to fight the temptation. Suddenly, an idea came to him. He flung the stick aside and jumped to his feet. "Mummy never tell me that I mustn't climb the apple tree." He nodded to himself, thinking how smart he was. "I just have to make sure that nobody don't see me." The tree was planted right next to the wall that separated Junior's yard from Mr. Roy's own, and the branches stretched far across it. "And I don't have to go on the house top if I use the ladder," he thought happily. "Mummy never say I can't do that." So Junior ran to the shed and began to struggle to drag out the heavy wooden homemade ladder. He was a short boy, and it was a tall ladder after all. After a wrestling match that lasted for nearly 20 minutes, Junior finally managed to lean the ladder against the zinc fence right underneath the outstretched arms of the apple tree. He used the hem of his t-shirt to mop the sweat from his forehead, then began to climb the rungs and was soon at the top. As he started scrambling across to the tree, he remembered Mr. Roy's admonishment from the day before. "You don't see that the apple them not ready yet. Them just turning pink. And suppose you drop out of the tree. You think your mother have money to pay a hospital bill?" Junior hissed his teeth dismissively. "The one Mr. Roy don't know what him talking about. The apple them more ready today," he told himself. "Me know that them can eat. Plus, me can drop out. Me is an expert. Me a climb tree from me little." First, he looked down into Mr. Roy's yard. Then he looked towards the house to make sure that he was nowhere in sight. He also looked towards the lane beyond the fence to ensure that none of his neighbors were watching. Satisfied that nobody would see him disobeying his mother's orders, Junior proceeded to step from the ladder to the nearest branch. He decided to look for the biggest, reddest fruits and pick those. He soon spotted 4 large wine-red ones at the very top of the very tall tree. They would be perfect for sharing with Andre and Romario. 2 for him and 1 for each of his friends. Junior took a deep breath and started climbing fast. He wanted to pick the apples and get down quickly before someone could catch him. He was almost at the top, within reach of his targets, and then, suddenly, he froze. He had been so excited and so anxious that he had forgotten to look out for lizards. Now, here, mere inches away from his fingers, sat a large green one, the biggest, fattest one he had ever seen. The creature peeped down on Junior from out of huge, glassy-looking eyes and shifted a leg towards him. Fear seized Junior immediately. There was no way he was going to allow a slimy lizard's body to come into contact with his own. And this one was now less than a centimeter away from touching his hand. He panicked, and his foot slipped out of its hold in the crook of a branch below. The lizard stiffened visibly as the limb jerked, and instinctively it made a grab for the nearest thing to it. When Junior felt the coldness of the reptile's toe gripping his finger, he did the first thing his brain instructed him to do. He shrieked louder than Mass Joe's pigs and let go. Junior realized his mistake too late. He was falling. He screamed like the siren on an ambulance, and after what seemed like an eternity, he felt his body hit the ground hard. Junior howled like a wounded puppy as he felt his right leg and left arm snap on impact. Miss Tiny heard the commotion and looked out of her upstairs window. "Junior!" she yelled down to him. "You all right? What you crying for, child?" Junior thought about Mummy not giving him any of the delicious stringy mangoes she was bringing back from the market. He did not want Miss Tiny to guess that he had been up in the apple tree. So he tried to stand up, but the pain ripped through his little body like a hurricane moving through a banana walk. "Why?" he bawled out and fell back down. Miss Tiny came running just as Mr. Roy flung his front door open and hurried over to where Junior lay squirming beneath his apple tree. "What happened to your youth?" Mr. Roy demanded. Miss Tiny knelt in the dirt beside Junior and cradled his head in her lap. "What's wrong, Junior?" Junior could not answer. Tears streamed down his cheeks as he gripped his leg tightly. Miss Tiny rested a gentle hand on the little boy's left arm, but pulled back when he yelped in agony and glared at her. "Why, me hand?" he screeched. "Hard ears, Junior! Don't tell me say you drop out of my tree, you know!" Mr. Roy shouted above the screams. "No, just yesterday me tell you not to go back up there. See there now? You gonna drop out and broke up yourself." Miss Tiny hissed at Mr. Roy and waved her arms to signal for him to be quiet. "Stop shouting at the child, Roy. That's not going to help now. Where's your mother, Junior?" "She gone to market, Miss Tiny," Junior whimpered. "Whoa, Lord, me foot, me hand. Miss Tiny reached into her bosom and pulled out her cellular phone. "Hush, child, hush, and tell me your mother's number." Mummy arrived 15 minutes later, and she stopped her market purchases when she saw her son wriggling around and crying like a newborn baby. She had called a taxi after receiving the news from Miss Tiny. Now she scooped Junior up in her arms and ran like lightning to the main road, where she jumped into the car and commanded the driver to take them to the hospital quickly. At the hospital, the doctor confirmed that Junior had indeed received some serious injuries. His left arm was broken in 3 different places, and his right leg in 2. He had to undergo surgery to set the bones, and both limbs were placed in traction, causing Junior to endure several days' worth of excruciating pain. On the first day of the new school term, his teacher and classmates came to visit him in the hospital. They each took turns writing get well messages on the white plaster of his 2 casts, using colored markers and pens. These notes helped to comfort Junior as he recovered. And Andre and Romario, as well as many of his neighbors, came to check on his progress each day. Even Mr. Roy brought him a dozen fully ripened apples 1 week after he had been admitted. Mmm, nice! Junior nodded his head with glee as he bit into a particularly juicy one. Thanks, Mr. Roy. Mr. Roy smiled and patted his shoulder kindly. You see why you should wait until them ripe before picking them now? Junior giggled and licked the juice that trickled down his arm. Yes, Mr. Roy, them taste better. 2 weeks later, the doctor told Mummy that she could take Junior home. His arm and leg were still in the casts, and he had been given a single crutch to walk with. When they arrived at home, Junior gave the apple tree a dirty look. As long as I live, I will never climb that tree again, he told his mother. Mummy smiled at him as she helped him up the veranda steps and into the house. And what about the house top? Junior shook his head vigorously. I won't go up there anymore, Mummy. So, you learned your lesson then? Mummy asked. Yes. So, if you want an apple, what are you going to do, Junior? I will use the hook stick or ask Mr. Roy to pick it for me, he replied. And what if Andre and Romario call you to go running around on the house top with them? What are you going to do? I will tell them that my leg hurting, so I can't go with them, Junior answered. Mummy laughed as she helped Junior to sit down on the sofa and propped his leg up on the hassock. Even after you get better? She teased. Yes, Mummy, I learned my lesson. Pain is not nice, and I don't want to go back to hospital again, he swore. Mummy patted him affectionately on the head and wrapped her arms around his neck tightly. That's a good boy, she beamed. Hope you always remember that promise. Next time, you could break much more than just your arm and leg. No more climbing for you, little man. Junior returned his mother's embrace. Okay, Mummy, no more climbing for me. And he meant it. The end.